Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Operational Procedures Masterclass, a masterclass in understanding and applying SOPs. And today with me, I have Rebecca. How are you doing, Rebecca, today?
Very good. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. We're delighted to have this webinar. It's actually following the launch of the Operational Procedures course that we're having this webinar. Normally, this would be reserved to Operational Procedures course clients, but we decided to make this one open, and we really hope that you are going to enjoy it. So now, who are we? Rebecca, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Well, Guillaume brought me in to help build the Operational Procedures course based on my experience of putting together my own small, helpful, hopefully, courses for pilots. And I myself am a pilot. So at the moment, I'm flying the Boeing 787. And before that, I flew the 330, 340, and the 380. So experienced in terms of a very variety of aircraft and flying pretty much to 6 continents.
Great. And actually, we were both at the same airline at some point, except you were flying an Airbus and I was flying a Boeing then. I've both flown the Airbus and the Boeing in my career, and now you're flying a Boeing, right?
Yes, that's right.
All right. Okay.
Masterclass, we can debate which one's better.
Okay. Well, let's do that. And so a little bit about myself. Most of you will know me I'm the CEO of Airline Selection Program, and my career has taken me to do 7 years at British Airways on the 320 and then on the Boeing 777. Then I moved to the Middle East to work for Emirates, where I worked for 9 years, 4.5 of those as a captain, and I was also a recruiter with Emirates. And as you know, I founded ASP in order to help you get your first job fast, and also to get the career that you really deserve by understanding what it means to be behind the curtain as a recruiter, but also understanding how to apply operational procedures, how to understand the airline pilot role better will make you for sure a better pilot, but also a better candidate. So let's move our presentation along. That's it. So you are going to receive a webinar handout in a moment. So I need to go and slide a document into the webinar, which I need to find. Okay, that's it. Good stuff. Lovely. Okay, so this handout will allow you to follow along as we speak. And so what are we going to cover today, Rebecca?
So we're going to try and go through 3 different things. First of all, with the SOP theory. So for those of you who haven't yet joined your first airline, or perhaps pretty low experience within your first line, we're going to try and talk a little bit about some of the nuances with SOP to help you understand the actual intent behind them and also how to apply them a little bit better. We're going to go over a specific scenario, so a real life application of this application of SOPs to help you understand it a bit better, but also to help answer some of those assessment questions like, when did you last break a rule, which seem to come up quite commonly in assessments.
Indeed. So a bit of theory, scenario, and real life application, and all of this is going to help you in your airline selection, of course. Okay, so why don't you tell us a little bit more about SOPs? What are SOPs, Rebecca? Why are they here?
I imagine most of you have probably come across them before to some extent. SOPs lay out how we do things in aviation. So they actually form the sort of foundation of pretty much everything we do. They tell us how we're going to do that. And this isn't just between the pilot and the airline, it's between the authority and the airlines, the manufacturer and the operators who are flying their aircraft. And it's even between ATC and pilots, cabin crew and pilots. But the thing with SOPs is they aren't always fixed. So what do I actually mean by that? Well, above the line you see on there, you've got ones which are rules and regulations, and they tend to be quite prescriptive, and they tend to involve words like shall and must. So they really are requirements. They're things that we must follow and we must do. But you also have the ones that are below the line on there. So they're ones which give you guidance or recommendations, or which just set expectations. And they can be a little bit more nuanced because they tend to use words like should, which give us as pilots a little bit more flexibility when we're using them. And that flexibility means we need to use our judgment. So we actually need to be considering what the intent of that SOP is all about, why it's actually there, and make sure that how we are applying it actually fits to the situation at that moment. So one example I have in my current company is we have an SOP which says I should always climb using the climb to thrust setting. And this helps improve engine life. But if my aircraft isn't meeting an ATC climb requirement or terrain clearance, then me following that SOP blindly by just using Climb 2 all the time is actually going to contradict some more prescriptive or restrictive SOPs, ones in terms of safety and efficiency. So I'm not going to just throw on full thrust. I'm maybe going to think about using Climb 1 or a lesser climb thrust setting. But I'm going to think about that intent of the SOP to do with engine wear, but I'm also going to think about those more restrictive SOPs, which look at safety and efficiency as well. So with our SOPs, we need to be understanding what they're actually telling us to do and also why it's telling us to do that. So we need to understand whether it's guidance, an expectation, a recommendation, or whether it's rules, regulations, and limitations. So the scenario we're going to go through today is going to look at a very nuanced area within SOPs, or hopefully try to show you that a little bit more clearly. And even to talk about when more restrictive ones might require the commander to still go outside of them in order to maintain safety levels.
All right, so how about our flight today then?
So as I said, we're going to be running through a little scenario for you all to follow through. And this is just to help set that scene slightly. So we're giving you a little bit of information on what we're doing today. So we're going to be departing out of Las Vegas Airport in the US, and we're heading up to Gatwick. And our call sign is going to be ASP001. We've given you a little bit of weather conditions in there as well. These aren't particularly important, just to note that it's quite strong winds on the day and it's quite hot. So we might have a little bit of a consideration to do with performance there. And our clearance, well, we're cleared to take off runway 26 right, the Retpac 3 departure, and the initial climb clearance on there is flight level 190. And in the pack that you've hopefully all downloaded, you're going to find some charts and things within there that you can follow through as we rise through this scenario.
Very well. So now we are at briefing and we are discovering our flight plan. So at this point, we could be either on the bus going from the hotel to the airport, or we could be in a briefing room somewhere. Do you want to take us through that, Rebecca? And I would suggest that you get through your pack because this could be a bit small on your screen at the moment.
So this is just a little bit of helpful theory for those of you who, again, maybe haven't quite joined your first airline, just to give you a little bit of an interesting theory behind what these look like. But generally, the pilot flying will go through with the other pilots. So in this case, I'm going to be pilot flying and Guillaume's my captain today. So I'd briefly run through the flight plan, the pertinent information on it. We would also go through the weather and the NOTAMs. We're not going to do through all of that today because it'd be a bit boring for you. But to run through this very quickly, so we're ASP001, we're out of Vegas to Gatwick. We've got our aircraft registration there, the correct date, and we can see it's release 1. So under the flight information, it gives us all the pertinent details there. And under the time, you can see our scheduled time of arrival is 10 minutes after our estimated time, so hopefully 10 minutes early today. As we continue moving down, we can see there's no MEL, so there's no technical issues with our aircraft today to worry about. We can see our air cohort flights. So further on where it says contingency 3, that's because we've got the en route alternates and fuel alternates that we've got included in there. And we can see we ETOPS the 180 minutes. Below that, we've got our FMS flight plan. So this is everything we're going to load into our box to show us our routing. And underneath that, we've got alternate 1, which has given us Stansted. So this probably means on this particular day, we only need one alternate because of the weather conditions and everything are pretty adequate for us. And again, that fuel ERA, so it's given us Keflavik, so we know we can use a contingency of 3%. So if we look below that at our fuel, I'm just going to run through this very briefly, but we can see our trip time is 9 hours, 18 minutes. We've got our alternate fuel, our contingency, 19 minutes, so that's in flight. So that'll probably give us about 40 minutes on the ground if we need to use that. We've got our final reserve, and we can see there's no additional or extra included in there. So right at the bottom, the fuel on board, this is our requirement, our minimum fuel to go, which is going to be about 51.1 once we round it up. Next to that, we've got our weight. And the main ones we tend to look at on that are our zero fuel weight, our takeoff weight, and our landing weight. We can see all of those are below the maximum. So if we did want to add loads more fuel on, we certainly could. But today, having gone through that, having looked at our NOTAMs, looked at our weather, we'd have a review of this together. And Guillaume, as captain, what sort of fuel would you be looking at?
Yeah, I think the fuel, the standard fuel is reasonable. We know that going to Stansted with 26 minutes is tight, but then we hope also that we'll have some of the contingency left. In any case, it's legal, it's safe getting into UK airspace like this. We know that Gatwick is a single runway airport. I don't see any problem with this. And if anything happens along the way, we'll have lots of time to plan as we approach into London. Then the only thing I would say is that we're taking off at 203.2 tons. And the max landing weight is 192.8. And so we've got, in case we had to do an immediate return, we'd have to lose around 10 tons. Okay, so probably around 10, 15 minutes of jettisoning at the most.
Perfect.
So I'm happy with this, Rebecca. I'm happy with your decision.
Brilliant.
Okay. Okay, let me try and move along. That's it. Okay, so now we have our load sheet. And at this point, just to let you know, we're going to try and make this as realistic as we can. And so we get an estimate of the zero fuel weight. So the zero fuel weight is the weight without the fuel, like it says in the title. That's the weight of the airplane, of the catering, and essentially and the passengers, the baggage, and the crew, what it weighs without the fuel. So we are going to have an initial zero fuel weight, then we'll have a final zero fuel weight because, of course, some people arrive last minute, some people don't end up not traveling, maybe some cargo pallets not arrived. But for the sake of this exercise, we're going to assume that the zero fuel weight we have here is going to be final, okay? So our zero fuel weight is, like we said before, 152.8. Takeoff weight is 203.3, and the landing weight is 158.2. And we've got a MACTOW. And the MACTOW, this is our mean aerodynamic chord takeoff weight index. So it's basically the index along the center of gravity of the airplane. This affects performance. That's why we need this information. Today it's at 22. Okay. Do you have anything that you would like to highlight here, Rebecca?
No, again, the main thing with this, just to give you guys all a little bit of theory, but once you get your load sheet, then the next thing we tend to do in our process of SOPs is we then run our performance figures.
That's right. So we are going to enter the zero fuel weight, the takeoff weight, into our little iPad that goes along with our airplane. And we are going to make a few verifications. We are going to, of course, also enter the weather, the actual airport with the specific runway that we expect to have on departure, because different runways have different lengths and different obstacles in front of them. And then we are going to enter the weather data, of course, depending on if there's wind or not, on how warm it is and the pressure, well, everything will change. So we're going to punch all that in, and we're going to get some figures that we can give to our airplane, which we are going then to input manually into the FMS. So these are the performance figures for the day. You want to run them through it for us, Rebecca?
Yeah, again, this isn't super important. We just put it here for your information for this particular scenario. But a couple of things to note from here. First of all, as Guillaume said, the weather, you want to put the most up-to-date weather in there. And we need to monitor the trends for that. Because if the temperature is going up to go down, if we've got more of a tailwind, again, our performance is going to change. And that output's going to change. So when we do this, we need to do it for the most current weather conditions and also for the runway we're going to be taking off on. And this is quite an important thing to know. It's a hint for what's coming up next. You can see at the top there of the output, it says engine out, EO procedure. If there's a lot of terrain or there's obstacles and things around, you can have a specific procedure for the runway. So you need to check this for each runway you're going to take off on. And again, because of the runway length and the conditions, you're going to end up with different flap settings and different speeds. So it's very important that we get this right and we get it right for the runway we're going to be taking off on.
Excellent. So now that we've got the performance figures at a suitable time, we would enter them in the box. And we will use these figures again to cross-check what's in the box at a certain point with a checklist, which we will run for you a little bit later. Okay, and so now that we've checked the performance, we are happy that we'll be able to depart. Everything's starting to look good from a loading perspective. The fueling is certainly finished, and we are ready to do our briefing. So we are going to start our briefing with an emergency brief. So in this case, in this scenario, I'm the captain, Rebecca is the first officer. However, she is going to be PF. So the way we are going to run this is the captain will have control until it's time to taxi, at which point the PF will have control. So there's going to be a control handover at the time of taxi. And Rebecca is supposed to remain PF throughout the whole flight until we park in Gatwick, with one exception. If there is a rejected takeoff, I will assume control of the airplane. Therefore, I'm going to do the first part of the emergency brief. Okay, are you ready for an emergency briefing, Rebecca?
Yeah.
Okay, so this will be a right-hand seat takeoff. In case of a failure before V1, I will call stop or go. If the call is stop, I will close the thrust levers, disconnect the autothrottle, apply an appropriate amount of reverse, and I will bring the aircraft to a stop. Once the aircraft is stopped, I'll stow the reversers, set the parking brake, and I'll go on the PA. This is the captain, attention crew at stations, and I'll go back to VHF1. Your actions.
My actions are going to be to monitor you. I'm going to confirm speed brake up and reverse as normal. And any abnormals or omitted action, I'll call them as I see them. Once the stopping is assured, I'll advise ATC, and if there's any signs of fire, I'll declare an emergency.
Very well. So still with the parking brake stopped, parking brake set, we will assess the situation using primarily the ICAS. If there's any checklists to do, we will do them. And if we lose control of the situation at any point, we will do the emergency evacuation checklists. Any questions at this stage? Okay, so after V1, or if the call is go, it's your airplane.
In that case, we're going to complete the takeoff and take any problem we have into the air. And there's going to be no further action of Guillaume below 400 feet other than raising the landing gear, attempting to engage in autopilot and selecting track. We do have an engine out procedure today to follow. So once we're above 400 feet and happy the aircraft is climbing away and routing where we need it to go, then I'll ask you to state malfunction. If there's memory items, we'll carry them out then. Otherwise, we'll continue until above the MSA or if we consider it safe to start the checklist. The engine out procedure is quite complicated because of that terrain. So we're going to make a left-hand turn at 1.5D from LAS. We'll track 050 and we'll intercept the 075 radial. And then we're going to turn left again at 10 miles to track 045. We're not going to accelerate to clean up until we've completed the first turn. What do you make the MSA to be, Guillaume?
Well, it's 13,200 to the north. It's lower at 10.8 to the south and 7.7 in the southeast.
The high MSA to consider.
It's 13.2.
If we need to make an immediate return, then runway 26 right is the longest runway. So initially, I suggest we follow the engine out procedure, but then we'll turn for a left-hand downwind for 26 right, and you can request vectors. What height do you think we should do that circuit at?
Well, by the time we turn left and we continue on the engine out, we have to rely on positive radar control and ask ATC, who have a different minimum radar control chart, to vector us down. And of course, we'll use our terrain avoidance terrain display system. And we are supposed to have another chart that's going to help us know exactly how much further down we can go closer to the airport. So we're going to use that.
Okay. We are going to be overweight, but we checked the performance already. So do you have any other questions regarding the emergency?
No, I would just say that, in case of an immediate return, we will have burnt at least 1 or 2 tons just by taking off, and that we're not going to be that much overweight that maybe, running the overweight landing checklist might not be needed if it's really dire and we're on fire, but we can reassess that when we are downwind.
Perfect.
Okay.
Now, all of you watching this right now are probably wondering why we're going through all of this with you. The point which we're going to make here is we're expecting to take off a certain runway, and we've got a lot of things like our performance, our engine out procedure, this emergency briefing, and the next briefings that we're going to show you as well that we have to go through. So there's a lot of things we have to do prior to departure.
Very well. Okay, so just to situate you and show you where we are now. So we are parked here on Terminal 3, and at the moment we are actually at the gate. We have not pushed back yet. And we plan to do a very simple taxi going south and then east to the full length. It's a little depiction error here, but we plan to go on the full length of runway 26 right. Okay, so let's do the normal briefing then. All right, Rebecca, so should we do the normal brief? Do you want to talk about threats?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of threats. We saw on the taxiway, it's very busy. So we're going to mitigate that by doing everything very slowly and reconfirming. And the same for the departure as well. It's a very complex departure. We've got a lot of height restrictions, speed restrictions, terrain to think about, busy airspace. So a lot of threats out there. How would you suggest we mitigate those?
Well, when it comes to the taxi, I'm not familiar with this airport at all. It's nighttime. Like you said, it's dark, lots of blue lights everywhere on the taxiway. It can get confusing. So we take it nice and slow, and we keep the cockpit as sterile as possible throughout. That's for the taxi. Luckily, the taxi is not that long, so so hopefully it won't get lost. And when it comes to the departure, well, I think one of us should use terrain and the other one can use radar, although the weather's quite nice. And that's about it, I think.
Perfect. We haven't flown together before, Guillaume, so I suggest we very standard. We stick to our you monitor me, make sure I'm doing everything right. If you don't like comments, I will use all the automation. I'm not going to run through the full briefing because we both checked it already in the FMS, but maybe just confirm for me the top altitude we have today.
Flight level 190.
I confirm the same. So we're expecting 26 right, the ret pack 3, and the initial climb to flight level 190.
Okay, thank you very much. And just so the minimum briefing would be still runway 26 right. Yeah, like you said, ret pack 3, level 190, and the chart of effective date 31st of October. And on that basis, like you said, Rebecca, because we both already checked this twice, there is really no need to read it again. We might have briefed as a threat mitigation as well to use the automation as soon as possible, as much as possible. But I think you said that. So sorry, I had a bit of an interruption, so I didn't hear everything. So are we good on the departure brief?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so at this point now, we've got some normal procedures and normal checklists to do. When the briefing's done, what do we normally do, Rebecca?
We do the before start checklist.
All right then, before start checklist.
So before start checklist, flight deck door.
Closed and locked.
Closed and locked. Passenger signs are on. MCP.
V2 169, track 264, altitude flight level 190.
Takeoff speeds.
V1 164, V2 166, sorry, a correction, V1 164, VR 166, V2 169.
CDU pre-flight.
Completed.
Trim.
22 units, 0 and 0.
Is 2 units 0, 0. Taxi and takeoff briefing.
Completed.
And beacon is on. So you can see there that before start checklist has just run through all those procedures you had to sit and listen to us doing for the last 10 or 15 minutes. So there's a lot of things we do before we're even ready to start the aircraft.
And at this point, we were cleared for pushback, and that's why Rebecca put the beacon on. And so we are going to push back. During pushback, we are going to start our engines. And at some point, we are going to be stopped again. We are going to release the ground crew, and he or she will show us the pin. And as we will have a flap setting set, and then we'll be ready for taxi, at which point I will tell Rebecca, you have control. And then we will do the before taxi checklist. Okay. But we are going to highlight something here as background information, like a little hint. And that's why you see this here. In the OMA, and this is something we explain in the Operational Procedures course, there are different layers of manuals that each contain some SOPs. This is the higher manual, the one that affects the whole airline, whatever the airplane type that you are flying. This is the runway, change of runway / intersection. What interests us here is just the change of runway part. In case of a runway change, the flight crew shall apply the respective type-specific procedure and shall conduct a departure briefing to address the differences as needed. There's another bit here which is not going to interest us here too much. And then there was also a requirement for a departure briefing, which we just did. It should be structured prior. Both pilots shall independently review the charts and the FMS. And whenever needed, flight crew should highlight any changes to the original departure briefing to ensure a shared mental model. And then you refer to the type-specific documentation. So this is just to paint you a picture. There's more to it. There are more SOPs behind all that, but we're going to move our flight along. So what happens next, Rebecca?
Well, as you said, we'd do that before taxi checklist. We've done all that. We've called for our clearance to taxi. And lo and behold, ATC tell us we've got a runway change.
Ooh. Okay, then. So at this point, we've not even moved, right, Rebecca? The parking brake is still set. So in the interest of good CRM, I'd say, Rebecca, what would you like to do? I actually know what I want to do, but I'm going to keep good CRM and I'll say, okay, Rebecca, what would you like to do?
Well, it's really busy. We're running late. We've got a lot of things to consider. Done this a lot of times before, Guillaume, and there's actually a little kind of memory checklist that a few other captains taught me. So if you want, I can just get everything set up and we can go as quickly as possible.
Okay, so yes, I know which checklist by memory, well, procedure by memory you want to do. A lot of us use it and instructors too. However, let's remind ourselves of what the expectation is and what the SOP actually is. So we have the possibility of doing things by memory, which is a technique that people are using, which is not exactly an SOP. In fact, it's not an SOP at all. And then we've got the real SOP, which is here. So the memory SOP allows us to be efficient. The real SOP is very heavy in this case, and that's why we chose this example for you today. So the one by memory would get us to check our chart, to find the new charts, compute performance again, fill the FMC, fill the MCP, which is the mode control panel at the top. So we fill the box at the bottom and the MCP at the top, and then we set the we check the minima for the return runway. We do the checklist again, and then we do a briefing. All of this happens quite quickly. You can do it in 3 or 4 minutes if you're good and well synchronized together. But what the SOP says here, do you want to read it, Rebecca?
Well, it says change of a runway SOP. The crew shall stop the aircraft, carry out their actions and flows, and run through the checklist as they read and do. And once complete, the crew should then resume at taxi. This will avoid distraction during taxi and ensure no actions are omitted or incorrectly applied.
And so the airline has trained us, and we know that this is read and do. It's not do and read. It's read and do. But what Rebecca is suggesting here is that we do it by memory. She didn't mention that we would ever actually do this one afterwards. So right now there's a bit of a blur. And what I'm going to tell her is, Rebecca, I understand that what you're considering to do is very efficient. However, it's not our SOP, therefore it's not really legal. If we do it stationary, it's safe. However, what I suggest, we are under pressure. We are at the borderline of our flight time limitations today, and we have a lot of operational pressure. Also, one thing that worries me at the moment is that we're not the only ones for which the runway has been changed. There's a busy airport. If we don't get going and moving, we are going to get into a massive queue that could be 45 to 50 minutes, and then we're going to have bigger problems. Let's remind ourselves, we also had 40 minutes of taxi fuel before the full contingency is burnt. So I would like to take your suggestion and use the memory procedure. And what I suggest is that we're going to do this procedure by memory in the first place. And then we know we're going to wait at the holding point. And at that point, we'll do the read and do again. In fact, we'll just do a read and check. My point is that this will get done before we go. But for experience purposes, if we do it now, we're going to waste too much time. Are you on board with me on this, Rebecca?
That makes sense to me. We are going outside the SOPs initially, especially with the sequence there, because that very clearly says only once complete we should taxi.
Yeah.
So we will go outside of the SOP with sequence, but we're also going to maintain the intent by ensuring we're safe and efficient. And we're going to make sure we do everything correctly at the end once we're stopped at that holding point. So I'm happy with that.
Exactly. And we remember why the airline wanted us to do it this way instead of doing the procedure by memory is that people made mistakes. People forgot things. But if we read and do at the end before we take off, we are taking no risk whatsoever. We are being efficient. We are being legal at the end. And we are being safe. So we agree that this is a good plan. Somehow we feel that if a manager was on board, he'd be quite happy that we did this. So that's what we're going to do. All right. Next slide.
So review that with the actual procedure.
Okay, and so here is the procedure. I warn you, it's a bit long. So just to make it fairly quick for you to this evening, this starting at CDU here and ending here is the whole procedure. It is very involving, okay? So this is in bold here. So the whole procedure is this whole thing. So it says, after the takeoff data is loaded in the FMC as part of the CDU pre-flight captain and first officer, which we have passed that point. Because we've passed that point, it means we've entered the figures once. If something changes, we need to do it all again. Pardon me, the following steps shall be performed for a change in departure runway or these two other conditions, which we are not going to get into detail. Basically, this says you're in this situation, you're after the CDU pre-flight procedure, you need to do the whole thing. Note, the following procedure shall only be performed with the aircraft at a complete stop with parking brakes set. This cuts short to any attempt of doing it whilst taxiing, right? And you see these little notes, how easy it is to want to skip them? Sometimes they're quite important. Okay, so this is what it is, and this is what we would be doing then at the holding point after we've done the memory procedure.
The difference is, instead of reading and doing it, we're going to do all the actions.
Yeah.
We're going to then stop, and we're actually going to read through this and reconfirm. So again, a little bit out of sequence. We're not quite maintaining that read and do, but we are maintaining the intent, which is effectively safety.
Exactly. And at this point, we're not panicking with time. We are sort of hurrying slowly. We are working, with really good rhythm, aware that this is an unexpected change, aware that we could be forgetting things, and we know at some point we're going to have to slow down. But now is not the time to slow down. So we're going to press on. And you want to go through this slide, Rebecca?
So just a little summary for you, because there's a lot of information we're throwing at you at this point, but we've got some issues there, things like the runway change actions, the flight time limitation pressure, that time or slot pressure we might be facing. And we've talked about how there's some SOPs which we must do, that we shall follow. So we're going to use this memory sort of flow checklist that we have to get things going. But we're going to make sure we really do maintain the intent of those SOPs and do them as a read once we've stopped and once we've got the capacity to come back together and do that properly.
Good. And here I like the blue note at the bottom here, which is that, before departure, you will almost always have to adjust your work blocks. This is us being flexible around SOPs. And this is something that we discussed when we were preparing this webinar. There are really two big times in working around SOPs. There's the time where before departure, before you've departed, you're not airborne. You can still get off the plane if you want, so to say. If you've departed, you can't anymore. Before, you don't have a linked destiny. That's a CRM concept. After, you have a linked destiny, okay? So before departure, it's actually very frequent that you don't do things exactly in the sequence they were written, because life does not happen the same way as it's written in the book. The zero fuel weight doesn't happen when you expect. The fueler doesn't come when you want. There's a problem with an armrest. There's some catering that's not arrived. You have to work around that and be smart about it. But come a point, you use checklists as guides, as safeguards. And if you've been put out of sequence like we are today, at some point, you're going to have to slow down. Okay? But once you are airborne, it's a very different story. Once you're airborne, now the SOP, you're going to do things in the sequence that the SOP is written, unless it's not safe to do so, then we'll do something else. Okay. Anything to add here, Rebecca? Good. Let's move on. Okay, so we're back to our memory checklist. And so this is what we would do at this stage. You want to run through this, Rebecca, or you want me to do it?
Yeah, it's just a recap again for you guys following through to see all the different steps that we need to do there. So we will try and do these in an order still. So checking our charts, setting those up, redoing our performance, inputting everything into the FOC, the MCP, checking our minimas if we need to return. There might be a different runway now. We might want to come around in a different direction because of the terrain. And then we still got to go through all that briefing again and the before start checklist. That's the sort of reset for us. So a recap on those, and just another look again at that very prescriptive, restrictive SOP that says we shall stop the aircraft. So depending on the situation, you'd have a little discussion over this, but that shall is pretty firm. So we would still try and look for a point where ATC can let us stop and hold so that we don't make mistakes. And again, that checklist, it says do it as a read and do. Well, that's when we know we're going slightly outside the sequence and slightly outside the SOPs, in that we're all going to stop and do everything, but we're actually going to just read that and confirm it at the end.
Okay, so this is us now. And so we've told ATC at some point that we were going to need to stop. They expect it, they know that we will need to stop. And so they've moved us away from the apron and they've allowed us to stop here where the big airplane is. Okay, so we were, yeah. So we are going to do our procedure by memory here. And at which point we tell them, okay, we're ready. It takes only 3 or 4 minutes. And now we're going to taxi all the way to the holding point. And at some point, we're going to have a break where either we'll tell ATC that we need 10 minutes, or we'll tell them that we've got an issue in the cabin to gain some time, or anything that gives us the time that we need to now do things properly.
Perfect. So again, this is just showing a new departure briefing. You can see that we maybe have different threats we want to talk through. We'd need to talk through that new routing. We'd have to check it independently in the FOC and then talk about it together. And we'd need to talk about that new engine out procedure as well that we potentially have for it. So a lot of new things to talk about. And this is why we want to be stopped when we do it, because you don't want to make mistakes or miss anything, or be distracted when you're taxiing and end up turning the wrong way, or finding yourself having some sort of traffic conflict.
And it's very easy to get influenced by operational pressure. Imagine if you are a fairly junior co-pilot, and that in this case, it's Rebecca who wanted to be expeditious, but a lot of the time when you will find that it's the captain who wants to be expeditious, and you as a first officer could go along the idea of doing it all by memory and not doing the SOP either, right? Because the captain knows, and the captain's done it many times like this, and let's not waste our time. This is when you've got to say, Captain, I understand this is efficient. However, it's not legal. This is not how we should do it. So we have to stop, I'm afraid. Again, you need to stand your ground on things like these. Of course, as you gain more experience, it gets more easy because you know where the line is. But when it says shall, it's pretty clear. Okay, good. Let's move on. So now we've got new performance figures.
Again, I'm not going to run through all of these. It's just to demonstrate how many different things there are to do. And if you look through a lot of accident investigation reports, there are so many attributed to mistakes during the performance stage. So SOPs tend to say you do this independently, you check it together, and then you recheck it again. So again, that huge importance of us actually stopping and giving ourselves the time and space to do this properly. And before I mentioned to you about using the most up-to-date weather, checking that engine out procedure and making sure those speeds are specific for the runway you're taking off on. So I've actually put 19 left there, which is a little threat because 19 right, because I think it was actually 19 left we were taking off one, was it?
Yes. Oh, that's a mistake here.
Whoa, there's a mistake even there. So yeah, it's very important to make sure you are free from distraction when you do these sorts of things.
Okay, and you might wonder why the runway had changed. So you can see here the wind, which was 310, it's now 180. Actually, we could probably have found out because it might have said in the briefing that the weather often changes. You could have had a hint. Maybe you knew it could happen, and so you would have rehearsed your little by memory procedure and read that in before you arrived. So you were sort of already ready to do this. And you might even have negotiated on runway 26, you could take off with this wind. Maybe ATC would have allowed you. Today they didn't, and so you're committed to runway 19 left now. Okay, there's many things. And now you know with this wind, you can actually still land on the longer runway. There's a few things you would still check with ATC before you went. But anyway, now we've got it all done and ready, and we are going to go back to the briefings done. So Rebecca, before start checklist, please.
So we won't run through it again for all of you, but just have a look through there and think through all those actions that have to be carried out and the potential mistakes and threats if you don't give yourself that time and space away from distractions to do it.
Indeed. And this before start checklist, we would actually not do now because we will do the full procedure, which will end with the before start checklist. So should I run this? Should we show you how we would run through this fairly quickly though, without reading everything?
You?
Yeah. So the FO then, so we're stationary, right? So the CDU is the same as the FMC. So the captain would look at the first officer doing it typically, right? So you would in the CDU, the first officer would verify and enter the following data. He would select the runway and departure routing, execute the runway and departure routing, check the legs page. You see, it's really prescriptive. These are things that we do without us having to say, because we do this all the time in this sequence, but it tells you everything. And now she's going to have to do all of this exactly the way that it is written to make sure she doesn't forget something because she's in a rush. And this is the time we take to slow down. And so we're going to do all of this. She's going to verify all of this. She's going to do all of that. Okay. Do an OPT takeoff weight calculation. So now we'll say, well, it's done. Okay. Maybe we're going to double check at this point. Oh yeah, cross-check the OPT actual takeoff weight calculation. Okay, so we've got this actual takeoff weight calculation. Emergency and departure briefing complete. So either we say we've done it already or we will do it again. And then we're going to, again, insert all the weights, all the data, all the CG and everything. We're going to set the MCP. I'm going to verify all of this, and this is the captain will do. So you see, it's all very prescribed. And then when all of this is done, perform all normal checklists, starting with the before start checklist. So now we go back to this one, and I'll call for the before start checklist once again. And at this point, we are reset. We're going to put away the book in which this checklist is, which is the QRH in this case for this airline. And now we are going to get ready to go. Okay. A lot more things will have happened. We'll have had to speak with the cabin crew. We'll have a lot of things will have happened. And at this point, if it was me who was the captain, once this is, done, we probably have 5-10 minutes before we go, say, okay, Rebecca, did we forget anything? How are you feeling? And we'll just make sure to put ourselves back in the zone, so to say. Anything you want to add at this point? No. All right. So I'll let you talk over this one.
Well, this is just a little summary of some of the things we went through. So sort of threat summary associated with runway change. And the reason we put this in here is so that you can, again, better understand why we need SOPs to help us deal with this. You've got things like longer taxi, which might require more fuel burn. So we had that little chat right at the start about contingency fuel. That's something we need to review in these situations. We've had to re-input all our performance figures. We've had to talk about our engine out procedure. There's all those new briefings we need to do. And all of this has been happening out of sequence. And then at the end of that, we've had to do that FMC setup. So it's very time consuming. And there's a lot of areas in there where we can make mistakes or forget things. So yeah, 2 really big threats involved with it, missing something and making a mistake. And this is why we need SOPs to help with stuff. But as we saw, those SOPs conflicted just a little bit with our efficiency there. So the main thing is always to maintain safety, but to have that consideration in there as well.
Absolutely.
So the purpose of our SOP, really it's to provide guidance and lay out how we're going to run things. And they act as a barrier to mistakes and a mitigation to threats. And they help standardize that process so that we can achieve those barriers or mitigations. Now, they also keep us on the same page. So if I fly with Guillaume today and then someone else another day, I still know that they're going to follow the same process. And both of us are aware of what that process is. And Guillaume, when we went outside these SOPs, made sure he briefed me on it, that he actually helped keep us on that safe page as we went through this. So our SOPs basically help us do all these things. We want to make sure we're stopped. We want to make sure we do things in the correct order and the correct way. But again, we want to maintain efficiency. So in this case, we actually went outside of that sequence a little bit. We sort of followed our own homemade SOP, for want of a better word, because the SOPs we had conflicted with that efficiency side of things, but we still made sure we maintained everything that keeps the level of safety and the intent of the SOPs.
Indeed.
But what we really did, the way we went outside the SOPs on that one, was how we,
We lost. Rebecca got frozen.
we would have been looking at a good 40-45 minute delay. But Guillaume made sure that he shared the mental model of why and how we were going to go outside the SOPs there. And he still made sure we followed the ones which were really critical for safety. So that one about stopping the aircraft before we both got really heads down doing everything. But as you saw, we only ran that SOP checklist, which said read and do right at the end. So we mitigated new threats that came out of it. We maintained the intent. We shared the mental model. And we made sure nothing conflicted with safety, but we did have that consciousness about our efficiency in mind. So a quick recap on that slide we showed you right there at the start. We've added an extra little comment in there about thinking about the bigger picture, or thinking about safety and efficiency overall. Now, there are occasions where commanders might have to go and make a decision that goes outside or which bends or breaches SOP in order to maintain that bigger safety or efficiency picture. And even those which are above the line or are less flexible, the really restrictive ones, might still require a captain to do that, to make that decision to go outside of them if there's a safety justification to do so. And this is why it's so important to understand the nuanced language within the SOPs and the intent of those SOPs, and not just blindly follow them.
Yes, and indeed, there were many implications today, and departing, feeling that you would take a significant delay is not just passengers being delayed; it's also you at the end of your flight being extra tired after a 10, 12-hour flight. That's an implication. These 45 minutes, they cost a lot in the end. So you have all that in your mind going, okay, what's the safest thing to do? Do the read and do and wait for 45 minutes, having done everything properly like a good sort of student, or see the bigger picture and be expeditious whilst preserving safety. For me and for Rebecca today, the choice was made, and I think we made the right call. Good.
So how do we use SOPs right? There's not going to be one specific answer for this. You're going to have to judge it on the situation. But we really do have to understand the intent, how to apply them, whether they fall above or below that line, and so we know how flexible they actually are. And we need to think about that bigger picture and consider whether or not it's justified to be flexible. And this means really applying judgment and experience to some situations. And you can see as an FO there, I'm so focused on efficiency. I missed that must and that shall comment, which was required for safety, so he's stopping the aircraft. Whereas Guillaume understood that. He wasn't prepared to bend that one, but he was prepared to go outside the SOPs a little bit to maintain efficiency. So when we talk about using them right, we mean just having this deeper understanding of them and how to apply them.
Exactly. And you may have at some point to influence someone in the right direction by explaining why you want to do something and taking them. And actually this example happened to me in real life, and the first officer didn't want to do this. So I really had to explain, the implication of the delay, what it would mean to our flight time limitation, critical flight. And in the end, when he agreed with it, we did it all at the holding point. And once we were in the cruise, he said, oh yeah, that was really a good idea. He was fairly new, and this SOP had just come out, so he didn't know that it was possible to do it differently. So this actually came from a real life example.
When you get asked that question, which they do tend to ask a lot in airline assessments, when have you bent a rule or where have you intentionally gone outside of SOP? This is really what they're looking for. They're looking for that understanding of how to apply SOPs well, safely and efficiently.
Exactly. And you see how understanding operational procedures is important, how much background it can give you to really be eloquent at the interview. And this is really all we want for you, to make you a better pilot, a better trained pilot as you approach your first airline, or maybe even transition from one type of operation to another. And most importantly, as you approach your selection. So we're nearing the end of this webinar now. We've got a special gift for you at the end. So hold on, there's just a few minutes to go. So you can get a free ebook of the first module of it, a PDF of the first module of the Operational Procedures course. Operational Procedures course is a really big course. We're going to talk about it briefly in a second, but if you want to flash this code, you will get this ebook that talks into more detail about SOPs. The Operational Procedures course is our latest release by Airline Selection Program, and don't worry as well, you'll have the opportunity to ask us a few questions in a few minutes. So it's a big course. As you can see, there's 6 modules. The first module is about SOPs. Then it's about pilot competencies in a way that's even more detailed than it is in advanced interview course. It's the CRM competencies, so to say, that come and complete the 9 ICAO competencies and the 8 recruitment competencies that ASP teaches. So it goes into more detail with Rebecca's experience. Then there's a big module on aviation industry awareness with safety stats and conflict zones, and we also debriefed incident and accident reports. There's a big module on operations such as flight management, fuel, and commercial considerations. And then there's scenarios and tech topics where we'll break down some real technical scenarios, such as hydraulic failures, double hydraulic failures, the different types of engine failures, the difference between a failure and an engine failure and a fire. All of these will be detailed in the course so that you can really have a good understanding of what it is to be an airline pilot. If you're not yet one, this course will give you the rest of the missing piece to the puzzle. And that's what it says here, so that you can become airline ready. Okay, so that's the last slide about the content. So the OPC has 6 big modules. We just detailed 12 hours of learning, some quizzes, and Rebecca has done such a great job. I mean, she's so good at what she does. She likes to teach, and you can tell, you know, when we were designing this course together, we're like, should we have some quizzes? Should we do some more things? And she had so many ideas. There's lots of PDFs in the course as well to help you. And you can also make use of our beautiful app, which you know if you already have Advanced Interview course or our other courses. And the great thing with it is that it works offline on the iPad and on the iPhone, so that if you've downloaded the course before, you can actually study on the plane if you're deadheading, for instance. Every month, there will be a masterclass such as this one reserved to Operational Procedures course clients. So there will be a 3-month theme, rotating theme, so that in 3 months, we're going to talk again about an SOP.